When I work with drones, safety is my number one priority. And so this is whether or not I'm working with students in a gymnasium or if I'm out on the Great Barrier Reef running one of my survey missions. And one of the things that's really important for me to do to get things ready is what's called a pre-flight safety check. And so I do the same pre-flight safety check regardless of the drone that I'm using. Sometimes there's a couple of different tweaks to the check that I run based on the particular drone, but in general, things are very, very similar. And so what I've done for this particular course is to really miniaturize everything that I do, and that includes the pre-flight safety check. So let's have a look at what I do in terms of teaching that. So you should already have downloaded the EpiCollect 5 app, and what we're going to do is to make sure that we have access to the mini drone checklist. So all you need to do to get that, once you open EpiCollect 5, and you don't need an account for this at all you need to do is to go to Add Project, and then when the keypad comes up, just type in mini drone. And this is going to be relevant regardless of the drone that you're using. So if you're not using the Parrot Mambo, that's perfectly fine. This will work for you too. So as you start typing in mini drone, it should already pop up with the mini drone pre-flight checklist. So once you see that, click on that, and that will be available for you to use. Now what we're going to do as we click into that particular project, as it's called within the EpiCollect 5 app, it's going to bring up the option for us to go through this particular checklist. So if you go ahead and tap on that, and then in the upper right hand side of the screen, there's an option to add entry. So we'll tap on the add entry, and now we start with the checklist. So the first part of it is really about the crew. Okay, so these are your pilot students, and we always have a pilot and a co-pilot. Now I make sure that I rotate these roles through all the activities that I do as well, so students don't feel left out. And most times I actually have 3 students working together, so I give one the role of the chief reporter. So get the students to write in the name of the pilot and the co-pilot, and again remind them that they will be changing those roles as well, so they don't feel left out. And once they've done that, then they can click next to go to that next screen. So the first thing that then they'll get to is to type in the name of the location. So where are they? And that might just be the name of your school hall or something like that. And this is when we now start to go through some of the technical questions that's going to make sure that your operations are safe. So the first question is, are you further than 3 nautical miles, which is the same as about 5.5 kilometers from an airport? So this is a regulation by the Civil Aviation Safety Authority for flying drones. Now luckily we're flying micro drones, so this actually doesn't matter for us because our drones are less than 100 grams. In fact, they're only 66 grams for the Parrot Mambo. So we're actually exempt from this particular rule, but I really like to reinforce that this is a rule so that if students are going out and about on the weekends with larger drones or whatever, they know what these rules are. The other factor that helps out is most of the time I'm working indoors with students, and of course that's not part of airspace, so we're exempt from this one there as well. But I like to just make sure that everyone knows that. The next one is, are you a safe distance from people, animals and property? And so what you'll usually see is when we're in a gymnasium situation, things are actually a little bit close. And in actual fact, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority regulation is that you must be 30 meters away from people. And so this is also a really important thing I find to point out to students, that drones aren't something that you can just go and fly next to someone. And there's a very good reason, because they can actually cause injury as well. So what I like to do is to make sure that I put in some extra safety precautions when I'm working within the gym, and recognizing that we're only working with very, very small drones. But I do like to keep a safe space where students stand behind a particular line, and then there's a safe area for them to fly as well. And you'll see this in my room setup notes. Ask if they're clear from any overhead obstructions. Usually that's power lines, that sort of thing, but if you're working inside, maybe it's a ceiling fan or the roof itself. And as part of this, I ask students to make sure that they keep their drones below shoulder height, and that's going to keep them out of the way of any overhead obstructions. Do they have a clear takeoff and landing site identified? So for us, we usually put down some mats, and that's their takeoff and landing mat. But of course they can land anywhere else where there aren't any students in that particular area, and that's going to keep them safe as well. And that's the same question with, do they have an alternate landing site? So making sure that they know where the safe areas to land are if they need that. Now, do you have any safety signs? So I've included in the course a downloadable safety sign for you to use, but another option might be to get the students to create a safety sign for themselves. So the one that I've given you to download, if you'd like to use it, something like this one. So I usually get 2 of those and pop them up in some area of the gym, and usually in a doorway, so where people are going to be able to see that safety sign as they come into the room, rather than it being hidden and they're already seeing the drones before they come across that sign. So once we've done that, we can move on to the next page, and that's really about checking the drone itself. Now this part is particularly important because students will need to redo this check after they have a crash, and they will crash as well. So it's something that we just need to get used to, is that students will crash, and that's perfectly fine. It's a learning point as well. So we go through our pre-flight safety check on the drone itself. So the first one is to inspect the frame for any loose parts at all. Now this particularly relates to these prop guards around here, because they can become loose. So we're just checking those and making sure that there's nothing loose there. And also, if you are using any of the attachments like the grabber or the shooter, make sure that they're properly connected as well. The next one is to check that the motors and the propellers are able to spin freely. Now this is the only time that you should do this. You put your finger inside with the propeller and make sure that all the propellers spin around nice and easily. Okay, that's the only time where you put the finger in the propeller, is when there's no battery in there. So to make sure the propellers are free from any cracks and damage. Now to do this, I like to use thumb and forefinger, and I run it along the edge of the propeller and along the top and bottom around all the propellers there. Now you're sort of looking for any nicks or cracks that sort of might feel a bit like a chipped fingernail, for example. Any small nicks and the propellers are usually fine, but anything major, you might want to look at replacing the propeller. They can also be bent back into shape after a major crash. If they bend out a bit, they're quite pliable. So you want to check for any loose wires, and again, this is really related to if you're flying with the grabber, for example, or if you're building any additional parts onto the Lego attachment at the top of the drone. So that concludes the main part of the drone itself safety check, and that again, that's the component that you'll ask students to redo after they have a crash to make sure that the drone is still flight worthy. Now the next thing is really to look at crew safety. So the first thing is to put some safety glasses on. So we have glasses that we use for the program, and prescription glasses are perfectly fine as well. So if your students have prescription glasses, I usually just leave them with the option to wear those. Now I do think it's very important to make sure your students have their hair tied back. I don't think anyone really wants a little drone fascinator stuck in their hair at any point. And then the next stage is actually when we're going to put the battery in the drone. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we need to do as we pop that battery in the drone. So I'll let you know the way that I like to teach this. So first of all, I like to say to the students, in a moment, I'm going to get you to put the battery in the drone, but don't do that just yet because there's a few things that we need to do. So as you put the battery in the drone, it goes into the back of the drone, and you'll see that the eyes or the lights at the front will start flashing. Okay, so that part where the lights are is the front of the drone. So you're going to need to put the drone on its landing mat with the lights facing away from you. So they'll be facing towards the front of the room. Once you've done that, so the battery in, lights facing away, pop the drone down, and then I need you to pick up all of your stuff, so all the tablets, anything else that you have there, and come and move behind the safety line. Okay, so now's the time to put the battery in the drone. Off we go. All right, so the reason that I like to do that in a step-by-step sequence is otherwise I have students starting to put the batteries in the drone immediately and they're not listening to what needs to be done in terms of putting the drone down and then moving everybody behind the line. Now, the next couple of things are also pretty important in terms of getting the timing right. And this remains in the pre-flight safety check as well. So it's going to help you walk your way through what needs to be done. So once you've got all your students behind their safety line, and again, just refer to the room setup module there that suggests a way that you might be able to do this as well. The first thing that they need to do is to make sure that they open Free Flight Mini, because as soon as the battery goes into the drone, it's going to start to look for the app to be able to sync to it. So if your students at this point close the pre-flight safety check app and open Free Flight Mini, all right, and it's going to start syncing. So while that starts syncing, and that can take a minute or 2 minutes or so, that gives you the time to go through those extra safety points while they're not thinking about it, but about the syncing. All right, so what I like to do is, as the students are all standing along their safety line, I like to point out that effectively they're standing in what's like swimming lanes or 10-pin bowling lanes. And that's the area in which they should keep their drone while they're flying. So if they do fly into somebody else's lane, they should land immediately rather than trying to bring it back, as students then often overcorrect their flight as well. So if they get in another lane, they should land immediately. I like to have some music that I use to bring them back to their landing pads, but it could be anything that you like. Maybe it's a whistle to bring them back, but just so that they know what the signal is for them to stop flying and to come home. And at this point, I also just double check that they're pointing out that they want to stay below shoulder height as they're flying. So the other thing that I do like to point out is that they should be standing at all times while they're flying at all, and this is just going to allow them to get out of the way if a drone does come towards them. So that concludes our pre-flight safety check, and once you're comfortable with going through all of these steps, and again this checklist is really going to help you, that's going to allow you to step into our manual flight using Free Flight Mini or whatever app you use to control the drone that you're using.